So I think what's really interesting about what we heard from Nick is he talks about protecting the rights of marriage, but also getting rid of the cultural aspects to it and protecting those rights in a secular setting. The problem is, the reason why as a society we're so willing to protect these rights, why we give wives the right to not testify against their husbands, why we give people financial rights, medical rights that go beyond the norm, is because of the heavy cultural stakes involved. So I think at the point that you decouple that from marriage, you make it just like rights attached to a civil union. We may legally recognize them now, but there's not the same cultural barrier against us infringing upon them in the future. We need to violate them to prosecute a trial in order to achieve a better financial end. And I think that's enormously problematic. But I also think there's something deeply problematic on their side because, quite frankly, I think people will be very different in their willingness to enter into contractual agreements with each other than they are in their willingness to enter into marriage because of these high stakes. So sure, people might not choose to frivolously get married, and when they do, it often ends very poorly. But they're even more likely to choose to frivolously enter into something like a civil union, where there aren't the same cultural stakes. And while we can say that people have the right to do whatever they want to do in the privacy of their homes, when there are children involved and where stable family life is beneficial, if not absolutely necessary, that's a real societal harm. But here's the other big thing. Right now there's a steady demographic shift where more and more people support gay marriage. In the end, that is going to be legalized. What Nick would do is throw out the baby with the bathwater and create a situation where we get rid of all marriage because we want to... So, I'm really amused by this notion that the church is going to always fundamentally object to recognizing gay marriage, but if we just stop recognizing marriage altogether, the church is just going to be cool with that. They're going to be like, yeah, man, we don't have a problem. I think that's really implausible. I think, if anything, the church will be even more opposed to that than the intractable minority he's afraid of. But here's the real issue, fundamentally. First off, I think it's easy to say that we'd like these rights to exist in civil unions, but so much of the unwillingness to violate them does come from the religious significance. I don't buy that the government won't in the future violate these rights to the point the government can wash its hands of marriage and say, well, we're not violating marriage, we're just violating civil unions, those are okay, those are just contracts, those are just laws. But also, I want to point out that there wasn't a response to what I think was probably the most important argument I made, which is, I do think there are real harms to people being willing to enter into marriage-like agreements with a higher degree of frivolity than they otherwise would. I think in general we see societal harms when people get married before they're ready to, before they fully assess that decision. I think that's probably worse when you strip away the religious significance, the forever significance, and you just make it entering into a civil union with someone. I think at the point that that's going on, you create a situation where there are more likely to be more marriages than badly, which affects children across the board in really perverse ways. But on top of all of that, I think that ultimately you don't get to liberating the gays from their current situation faster. I think, if anything, we're going to have gay marriage in the fairly foreseeable future through the courts or through voters. We want to have the full institution to give them when that time comes.